Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to discuss the strategy that Labour executed superbly this week in getting what seemed an unlikely and certainly unexpected parliamentary investigation into Boris Johnson. Obviously, full disclosure, I'm a Labour supporter, so by all means judge my reasoning harshly, but there will be plenty of reasoning to either agree or disagree with. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this last week has been political dynamite. I talked about what the inquiry into Boris Johnson will mean and how it happened from the Tory point of view yesterday, but it also showed a strategic aptitude by Labour. I still think they are making some strategic errors, definitely on social media, there's no argument about that. Maybe on Brexit strategy, that is less certain. People think they are, but actually there is logic there. But there can be no doubt at all that Labour not only have a strategic mindset now, but the ability to use it. Because what happened this week was not easy to achieve. And it relied upon a long-term strategy. This wasn't political opportunism. There was a lot of preparation that built up to this. Someone asked in the stream I did earlier this week if Starmer's performance at PMQs was the best ever. And I said it was a great one for appealing to the public, but no, not his greatest. My reason is what made this possible were the traps that he had laid for Johnson for a long time. All he did this week was collect the traps. For example, when people cite the evidence that Boris Johnson has deliberately misled the House, on what do they base it? Statements that Johnson was forced to make as a result of Starmer's careful questioning. Although each week I talk about the way Johnson keeps trying to avoid answering the question, Starmer's skill in prosecuting criminals was working hard to extract little nuggets here and there. This week he seized upon them. The traps were sprung. The speeches that he gave on Tuesday and Thursday, the PMQs he took part in on Wednesday, anyone who could have put those performances in, anyone. It's true he carried them out well, with one niggling exception that I did mention in my PMQs review, and I think I'll be talking about in another video, maybe on Sunday, maybe on Monday. But the brilliance was in the groundwork that led up to this. How many times have I said in the past that Starmer's been getting Johnson to make statements that he really didn't want to, that he was saving them for later? Now 4 of them are forming the basis of a parliamentary investigation into Boris Johnson's conduct. And this investigation's a masterstroke. Consider its benefits. First, it's not being carried out by officials or other unelected people. This is a committee made up purely of MPs. In fact, with Chris Bryant recusing himself, it doesn't even have its Labour chair taking part. There can be no accusations of a stitch-up when it concludes, whatever it concludes. 2/3 of the members are Conservative MPs, 1 Labour member taking part. When the Conservatives tried to put pressure on Sue Gray and the Met Police by saying, be careful what you conclude, you shouldn't be deciding matters related to the Prime Minister, you know, you're in very dodgy territory here. You know, they were saying, you know, the Prime Minister's conduct is a matter for the public or elected MPs to decide, not unelected officials. Well, now they've got their wish. They cannot complain. They will, they will, but their complaints will be weak to all but the most partisan and blinkered. Second, doesn't matter what the conclusion is. It's good for Labour. Consider the possibilities. Let's say the committee is inconclusive. It can't exonerate him. That's impossible. Boris Johnson did mislead the House. That is no longer denied. The question is, did he do it deliberately? Any sensible person will see that he did. It's absolutely ridiculous to try and imagine a scenario where Boris Johnson said what he did innocently. But the committee may say that given the gravity of the situation here, this is a sitting Prime Minister, they have to be 100% sure. They may decide they can only be 99.9% sure. Okay, fine. So now a committee made up of mostly Conservative MPs will say they're not sure he deliberately lied. How will that reflect on the Conservative Party amongst voters who can see as clear as day that Johnson absolutely lied? All of a sudden, the committee being mostly Conservative MPs works against them. Voters might see it as a stitch-up. Next possibility is that the committee finds that Johnson did deliberately mislead. Do you know what? There's no doubt about it. Absolutely, he lied. Can't be accused of a stitch-up because a majority of them are Conservative MPs. Now, The penalty is supposed to be resignation, but the committee cannot force the Prime Minister to resign. So they recommend a suspension instead. They can do that. Now, to be credible, it has to be, you can't just suspend him for a day. That'll be ridiculous. If they're going to look credible, it has to be a substantial suspension. If it's 10 days, Boris Johnson faces a recall petition, and if that succeeds, and it will succeed, he's basically sacked as an MP. He's not an MP anymore. That's it, he's gone. He can stand in the by-election. Doesn't stop him standing in the by-election that will then result. But it'd be very messy. And it would mean that for in the interim period, we have a Prime Minister who is not an elected Member of Parliament. Very bad outcome. But this penalty is a recommendation. They can't force it. It has to be approved by the whole House of Commons. Conservative MPs could block the punishment. But then they'd seem to be protecting Johnson. Given that they allowed the inquiry in the first place, it would seem odd to risk the full fury of their voters by blocking the punishment that comes out of it, because that'll look even worse. The final possibility is the committee fines against Johnson, recommends a substantial suspension. MPs go along with it, they can't not. The recall petition is successful, which is certain. It only needs 10% of registered voters in his constituency to sign that petition. That'll absolutely happen. Johnson is no longer an MP. Even if he carries on as Prime Minister, which he could, and even if he stands in the by-election, and even if he wins it, which might happen, the damage done to both Johnson and the Conservative Party will be irreparable at that point. Utterly irreparable. There is now no bad outcome for this for Labour, and no good outcome for the Conservatives. The Tories basically now have to try and work out what is the least crap outcome for them and try and work towards it. Third benefit, it drags the whole thing out. Partygate is deeply damaging to Boris Johnson personally and to anyone supporting him generally. Given that he's not facing a confidence vote, or at least we don't know at the moment, that means his entire party is taking on damage over this. Tory MPs know that Partygate will never not be damaging. They were hoping it would blow over, that it wouldn't be worth talking about come the general election. Boris Johnson keeps pushing that. People want to move on from this. Oh, why are we still going on about this? You know, because they desperately want to move on from it. They're hoping that the passage of time makes the offences seem less serious and that many would forget. But that is not going to happen. The investigation does not even begin until the Met Police have finished their investigation. Who knows when that will happen? It's several weeks at least, could be months. Then the investigation will also take time. It's a serious investigation. It needs to consider a lot of evidence, including the photos of Boris Johnson dancing topless on top of a portrait of the Queen. I actually don't know that such a photo exists, but there are certainly compromising ones out there. The committee will see them. They will call for witnesses. They will consider it all. This committee as well can have nothing hidden from it. None of this national security bollocks. If they want to see some evidence, they will be seeing that evidence. But also the committee have got other things to do as well. They hear other cases. They're MPs have their own constituency workload as well. The investigation may take some considerable time. Labour will be fine with that. No problem. Have it as a slow burner. No problem. It'll mean we can keep talking about it in anticipation of the result. As a result of this investigation, there is now no serious prospect of Partygate being done and dusted anytime soon. Even if all the investigations are concluded this year, which you would think they will be, but is not guaranteed, might not be the case, the ramifications will be picked apart for months afterwards, well into 2023. Then there are people who will surely still be holding on to more damaging evidence to leak at times when Johnson is most vulnerable. That might include the general election if he's still leading the government at the time. And none of this could happen without Conservative MPs refusing to rally around a desperate leader. Johnson pulled out all the stops to prevent this. Well, apart from appealing personally, that is, I still cannot understand why he left the country with such danger about unless he was confident he had it sorted. Doesn't he remember what happened to Margaret Thatcher? I mean, I took his flight to India, I said at the time, I took that to mean he was confident his MPs were on board and he wasn't needed personally to make sure of it. So either he or his whips made a spectacular miscalculation, or Johnson decided that he wouldn't be able to personally appeal to his MPs. If the latter, it means he knows he's lost his authority. But it was no easy task to trap Tory MPs into abandoning Johnson here. You know, the wording of the motion had to be very careful. The groundwork had to be carefully laid. You know, this motion had to make it impossible to block without making it look like you were covering up the truth to the public. There were other motions that the opposition could have tried, but they wouldn't have achieved anything. This motion, the first of its kind ever to be approved by the House of Commons, was win-win for opposition parties. If Tory MPs voted it down, all the campaign leaflets for next month would have outed the local MP as blocking investigation of Johnson's Partygate lies. In fact, I gather Lib Dems had already produced a load of leaflets doing just that. Okay, they'll have to be junked now. If they let the motion pass as they did, they get an investigation that, even if it somehow does not find against Johnson, will still be incredibly damaging to the party. Now, they may get rid of him in a few days. They might get rid of him sometime today. I don't think so. But they might get rid of him quite soon. And then that's that. I do wonder what impact Steve Baker's attacks will have on other Tory MPs who looked up to him. You know, but they might just tie themselves in knots, not really knowing which of the, because they've got several options now, and not necessarily knowing which one is the right one, causing permanent damage to their reputation as they try and work out what's the best option. But best of all, this shows that Boris Johnson no longer has a majority of MPs willing to throw themselves in front of him as barely human shields. His MPs will let him try and con his way out of future trouble, no problem, because they don't really care about his misdeeds, or most of them don't. You know, so they may just say to him, look, if you can get yourself out of trouble, you carry on, son. Assuming they let him bumble on for a while yet, which they may or may not. But they're not going to put themselves to the hazard for him anymore. And everyone knows this now. They've said to him, basically, sort out your own mess. Take some responsibility. And it may well have been true for a while. It may well be that Boris Johnson's lost authority for a while. But we now know with absolute certainty he has no more bodyguard. A Times correspondent said that Starmer went straight to the Strangers, which is a bar in Parliament, and got a big round in. I'm guessing he was quite pleased with how this has gone. And well, he might be. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And until next time, I'll see you later.